Hey, welcome back to part 11 of the Dream Home build. This is week 36 into the build and we have just started hanging up the drywall. This video will be covering the planning and execution of the drywall process. I also end up having a serious issue during the installation. And later on we proceed with mudding and priming the drywall, and finally I'll wrap up by showing you guys how we painted the ceilings. So a lot of people ask me, why did we choose 5/8 thick drywall everywhere instead of 1/2 inch? They say you should only use 5/8 on the ceilings and the walls should be fine with 1/2 inch drywall. Well, the reason was that the drywall guy offered to do the entire house in 5/8 inch thick drywall for the same price. And like many other folks, I had seen a Matt Risinger video where he advocated for 5/8 drywall all around. I remember hearing benefits like it's, easier to nail into, it's thicker and stronger, and the biggest benefit that I was looking forward to was the potential visual reduction of inconsistencies of the framing. Okay, that was a mouthful. Basically, since my interior frame walls weren't exactly super straight, I was hoping the 5/8 thick drywall would make the waviness of the walls less noticeable than the thinner alternative. Now, the only reason this entire video clip is muted is because the crew is listening to some kind of Mexican mariachi music, and who knows what kind of copyright issues I'd be getting into with that on YouTube, so you'll have to listen to me talk instead. By the way, it was freezing cold during this time. I remember seeing the guys up on the scaffold and working, and it was so cold you could barely bend your fingers. And thankfully, we were about to put in our main entry door and turn on a bunch of those diesel torpedo heaters to crank up the heat. Now this is our garage space. We added wood nailers onto the steel beam, as you can see, so that they could install and wrap drywall all over the beams, or all around the beams, which turned out pretty good actually. Okay, so once most of the drywall was hung, and the piles of the drywall material were no longer leaned up against the walls all over the house, this exposed 4 massive dents in the floor. I'm talking like huge dents that broke the actual subfloor, just smashed through it. If you've seen my previous videos, you would know that we had something very important underneath the subfloor, the radiant heating system. So yeah, not good. I immediately took photos and sent them to the drywall guy, and and asked him, hey, what in the world happened? I was pretty upset because it was late in the day, came there from work, straight there, nobody's there except for me, so it was just a text. Actually, I think I called him too, but he didn't answer. He had no idea. I think the likely explanation was that when they had the drywall delivered, the delivery crew probably dropped the stack of drywall a little bit too hard on one of the ends, and it broke through the floor. Or maybe the wheel dolly thing that they use to move the stacks of drywall around the house, maybe that thing broke through, I don't know. But I gotta believe that I'm not the only one who has had this happen, because drywall crews deliver drywall all over the United States, and we pretty much all have the same subfloor, so who knows. But the drywall crew sure made it seem like he had no idea what happened. Anyway, because of the radiant heating, I had to basically remove the duct runs and then carefully remove the radiant heating PEX tubing and aluminum plates, and then cut out the damaged subfloor and replace it. And then of course reinstall everything in that order. This was definitely not like a huge setback, but at the same time I was very frustrated. And of course, the drywall guy told me that he had a guy that he knew that would fix this for him, but I made it very clear to him that no, because of the radiant heating, we had some stipulations, and I'm the only one that's allowed to make repairs, and I would just bill him for the time and materials. Also, what do you guys think? I mean, is it fair to ask workers not to smoke inside the house, even though the house isn't finished yet? I had to ask the gentleman a couple of times, because mainly when my wife and kids were there, but he seemed a little bit thrown off by that. I don't know. Now, while things were getting done, my dad and I installed some shelves in the basement shelter room. And these were from Home Depot, by the way. Actually held up really nice, and actually while I'm making this video, they're still in there with building stuff still in there, even though the house is done. But yeah, super cool shelves. Basically like a wall entry here where you would go into that area of the house. There's going to be a railing here. There's a little bump out, which was framed out with a couple of studs, and it was very much out of square. For instance, if we look over here, you can see the parallel line of the subfloor, and there's about an inch, no, maybe like a 3/4 inch difference between that corner and that corner. Talked to the drywaller. He said that, yeah, they probably should have shimmed it out. So they're going to come back and they're basically going to shim it out and use 1/2 inch drywall to make it straight. The only thing that I'm thinking is if they do that, they're going to grow out that bump out by, you know, whatever, 3/4 of an inch. And it will no longer be exactly the same as that bump out. But I don't think it's going to be super noticeable. I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker. I'd rather have it be square than not square, but the same symmetrical dimension. As I look through the house, there's places where there are small nicks in the walls. And he just said, if you find anything like that, just we'll fix it. But I guess the approach is I'm gonna prime everything, and when I get the primer off, I should be able to see quite well where there are any kind of deviations. And they actually come back after we prime. It's a standard procedure. They come back and they take a light to all the walls, and using the light, they'll be able to check for bumps and dents. Usually they're dents from tools, or usually tools, like right here. There's a little dent. Sometimes the guys walking on the stilts will accidentally knock a stilt into a wall somewhere. I've seen that happen. So I thought maybe this is something they would fix before painting or like before priming, but sounds like they just want to have us prime and then they'll come back and deal with it later. It's master bedroom, got our 3 picture windows and 2 functioning casements with a picture in between. We were going to do drywall returns on all the windows, at least on the verticals, and yeah, long story short, the drywallers weren't really willing to shim out the window frames to be consistent all across the house. They just wanted to stick a piece of drywall on there and call it good. My problem with that was not all the frame openings are exactly the same size, so therefore you have an issue with, you know, vertical level and also the exposure of the frame around the window. Talked to them, they're like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So I was supposed to shim it out myself if I would have wanted them to do drywall returns. And I honestly just did not have enough time to do all that, because that's a lot of work. You got to go to each window and, you know, whether or not it needs to be shimmed, shim it out. So we'll be doing trim on the windows, which is fine. We'll be doing the jamb and the casement around the window, just like you would any traditional window trimming process. And I'm sure it'll look great. The master shower does not get drywalled all the way because of the tile. It'll have a Schluter board instead of drywall. So now we did go down a couple feet from the ceiling. The reason for this is talked to a really experienced tile guy, and he said that oftentimes if you put hardy board or any kind of tile backer all the way up to the corner of the wall into the ceiling, that difference in material will also present itself as a difference in expansion and contraction. So you might get corner cracks where the hardy backer or Schluter board or whatever you have touches the actual drywall ceiling. So the trick is to run the drywall down a little bit and then transition to the backer board, whatever you're using. That way your transition is just a regular horizontal line as opposed to an actual corner. And you can actually run your tile across the drywall. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with putting tile on drywall, especially with 5/8 drywall. It's just a matter of, maybe you shouldn't do it everywhere, but in this case, it'll be enough. So apparently our house got what's called a level 4 finish. And what that means is they hang the drywall, they tape the drywall seams, and then they put a layer of mud on there. And then they come back and they put another layer of mud on there. And the first layer between the seams is, 3 inches maybe wide. The second layer is a little wider. And the third layer is very wide. They use like a 12-inch wide tool. That's why the mud is very tall. It's about 12 inches wide, which is considered level 4, meaning the transition between each piece of sheetrock drywall is very, very smooth. Now, level 5 would go another step further, and they would apply the drywall mud on to all of the surfaces of the sheetrock. And they would use also their tools to smooth it all out. Talked to the guy, he said that it's obviously extra labor, it's a lot more expensive, and in his experience, it's not necessarily worth the extra cost. I don't know, maybe it is. We'll see. It'll be a lesson learned with this house as whether or not level 5 would have been worth it or not. Or maybe it's something we should have done on the ceilings only. As you can see, there are some areas that are completely covered with mud. Right there, right there, right there. But it'll be a lesson learned whether or not it's worth it. Or of course, the other option is you just get texture and you avoid that altogether. But we don't want texture. Now that all of the mudding and sanding was complete, it was time to prep for priming. Using some dust mops, we were able to gather a ton of the sanded dust off of the walls and ceilings. Wearing a mask was not optional, as in you had to wear a mask, as the dust was making it almost impossible to breathe. And luckily, we were able to take advantage of those nice Marvin casement windows and open them up and kind of let that dust go out. Of course, I had to do the same thing in the garage as well. So what I'm doing here is my dad has this old, really good Graco paint sprayer. It's an older model that was once very expensive in its day. And to keep the paint hose lines clean, I got a roll of this disposable plastic tubing. I forget what it's for, but it works perfectly. We were able to slide it onto the entire length of the paint hose. This way, when we were finished, we could just slide it off and throw it away while the line's gonna be perfectly clean. For the spray gun, I purchased a 2-foot extension wand so that I could easily reach the 9-foot ceilings and not need a ladder unless, of course, I was spraying the vaulted ceilings. My brother followed me around so that he could use the paint shield in case anything needed to be blocked off and protected from spray. All of the windows were already taped up and sealed, of course, including the sliding patio door and the main entry door. You may be wondering whether or not we were going to backroll everything that we sprayed. The answer is yes. But not the primer. The primer actually gets a light sanding once it dries, so backrolling it would be a waste of time and effort. There's a trick that I used when running out of paint. Let's say you are almost done spraying the primer and you just need a few more feet to spray, but the bucket is pretty much empty and the sprayer is about to start sucking in air. Well, if you know that you're about to be done with the paint itself, you can actually pour water in the paint bucket and the sprayer will start pumping in the water to push the existing paint out of the lines. And think about it. You have like 30 feet or so of pure paint in the line or primer, whatever you might have. May as well use it up. Plus, this gives you a head start on cleaning the sprayer and all the equipment. Does the color stay all the time, or does it go away?
It'll go away.
Is it like that pink stuff you buy at the store where when it dries, it turns white?
No, not really. You'll still see like a light blue tint to it. Okay. You don't want to use the red sticker. All it is just what's it called? Chalk line?
That's just chalk line dust.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you don't want to use the red one is always bad because it'll bleed through certain paints. Mm-hmm. And the blue one's just way better, and it doesn't.
So this is like a trick of the trade here. Is this the most common things where you get the tape line?
Yeah, sometimes it just depends on once it's sanded. Sometimes it'll be perfectly smooth, and sometimes you get little small details that come up in it. There's only all it needs is just thin coat on it.
What about I was going to ask you about the little the fiberglass mesh that shows through in the corners.
Yeah, some of those, the same deal. Once it's sanded, then some of them come through and some of them don't.
Mm-hmm. So you just add some more?
Yeah.
And here was the painful part of sanding every square inch that had to be primed. Before or during the sanding, you might ask yourself if it's even worth it, and the answer is yes, it is. The difference in a sanded versus non-sanded primed wall is massive. You can see it and you can feel it with your hand. So now that the drywall was primed, sanded, and patched in areas that needed work, we had the opportunity to paint the ceilings. Of course, painting walls would be too early at this stage, as there was still much construction ahead. But there's really not much happening around the ceilings after this part, so painting the ceilings was just a perfect time right now. Remember when I mentioned back rolling? This was where we started implementing it. Using an ultra-wide 18-inch roller, my brother would follow me and back roll everything that I had sprayed. This achieved two things. First, it evens out any oversprayed lines that look a little bit thicker. And secondly, it creates a tiny bit of texture on the ceiling. And I'm not talking about popcorn texture or something. This is just a very slight orange peel texture that will help hide any imperfections in the ceiling once everything is finished. Actually, there's a third reason that I just remembered. If you back roll and maintain the orange peel texture, it means that if you ever need to touch up paint in the future, which you will, the roller you used for the touch-up will match the rest of the texture. If you only spray, then any touch-up you will do will show up a mile away. Unless, of course, you plan on spraying all of your touch-ups in the future and repairs, which I'm pretty sure nobody does that, so. Well, thanks for sticking around and watching. We'll see you all in the next video.